Hi, this is Prashant Bharadwaj. Today's topic is going to be inventory control. We have been discussing in this class how to manage inventory, production, capacity, quality, and today we will discuss how to manage inventory in an organization. Inventory control, the whole area of inventory control, really started in the early part of the 20th century when people started making products in huge quantities in mass production. At that time, there was a person called Harris who came up with a model which, even after 100 years from that time, we are still using that model today. We will be discussing that in a few minutes. Now, inventory is the lifeblood if you're talking about retail organizations. Same thing with manufacturing as well as distribution type companies. It is also important in a service-oriented organization like a hospital or even an educational institution. Inventory is an asset. If you look at the balance sheet of any organization, you will see if the assets are equal to about $10 million. You will see out of the $10 million, $3 to $5 million can be in inventory, especially in a manufacturing company. Even if it's a publicly traded company, like Boeing, I would want you to go and look at a company like Boeing or General Motors or other manufacturing companies like that. And if you look at the balance sheet, you will see the assets, and out of that assets, you will see a significant part of that assets will be in inventory. So is inventory an asset? Yes. When you're looking at the balance sheet, it is an asset. And like I said, it really helps a manager in a retail or a manufacturing organization. But like we have studied, the lean organizations look at inventory as a liability. Not on the balance sheet, of course. On the balance sheet, it is still an asset. But in the mindset of a manager, it is very important to understand that inventory can be a liability if you don't manage it properly. We will discuss that in more detail. So the job of the operations manager is to make sure that inventory is an asset. Because inventory, if you have significant amounts of inventory in retail, that leads to good customer service. Why? Because if you have inventory, you would get what the customer is looking for, or the customer gets what he or she is looking for. Same thing in a manufacturing company. If you have the inventory, you can meet short lead times. You can get the jobs done on time. You can meet the deadlines. However, if you do not have enough inventory, your customer service will suffer. So the advantage of having high inventory is that customer service will be very high. On the other hand, the greater the inventory, the higher the chances that inventory can become a liability. That is the trade-off for every operations manager. How much to order, how much to produce, how much to procure if you are in retail, when to order, when to procure, when to produce. These are the simple questions in inventory control, but the answers to these questions are quite complex. We will see today some of the models in inventory control. There are very sophisticated mathematical models to manage inventory. Today in our discussion, we will go through one of the most straightforward models called the economic order quantity model, which was started close to 100 years back. And we will also look at few other managerial concepts in inventory control. And if you're really interested in this area of inventory control, you need to take classes in supply chain management and inventory control, where you'll be exposed to dozens of other kinds of mathematical models. So let's get started and look at what exactly is inventory control conceptually and look at some models today. Today what we are discussing is independent demand inventory control, not dependent demand inventory control. What is the difference between the two? We have already discussed dependent demand inventory control. This is where the demand and the inventory of the engines are dependent on the demand and inventory of the car. The demand and inventory of the hard disk is dependent on the demand and inventory of the laptop. So there is that dependent parent-child relationship in that manufacturing scenario. What is the best model for inventory and production control there? Whenever you have dependent demand, it is MRP, Materials Requirement Planning, which tells you exactly how much to order, when to order, how much to produce, when to produce. Once you tell what the demand for the parent item is, the item that you are selling, once you tell what the demand of that particular item is, MRP goes through an explosion process and tells you exactly what the inventory and production should be for every subassembly component and raw material. It can be a Boeing 787, it can be a Ford car, or it can be a Dell laptop, or a simple furniture item on which I'm sitting. For each one of these, MRP, Materials Requirement Planning, can help you identify how much to produce, how much to carry in inventory. But when we are talking about independent demand inventory control, you do not need MRP. You can use some of the methods that we are going to discuss today. Where do we see independent demand inventory control? The answer is retail. In retail, when I am selling something, like a car, a simple example, I'm not worried about the inventory of the engine and the transmission and so on. I'm not manufacturing them. I may have some spare parts, that is different. But I'm just talking here only about the car, the laptop. So that is what we are talking about as independent demand. So typically retail is where you will see independent demand inventory control. And like I already said, the simple questions are how much to order, when to order. That is what you need to answer. And of course, if you're McDonald's, for example, some of these companies like McDonald's, they have very, very stringent requirements for their suppliers. Close to 99% of everything that the supplier is selling or shipping to McDonald's has to be shipped within 2 days of the order. So the lead time is only 2 days. In addition, McDonald's says 99% of everything that is shipped has to be there within 15 minutes of the specified time. So if they say 2:15, it has to be there on Monday afternoon. It has to be there between 2 and 2:30 in the afternoon. That is how stringent the regulations are. So you have to, as a manufacturer or a retailer or a distributor, understand exactly how much to order, when to order, so that you meet the customer demand. Whether the customer is the end user or a distributor or a manufacturer. This is a simple slide. We have discussed this in a lot of detail in the past, pretty straightforward. The typical levels of inventory or types of inventory. There are 3 stages of inventory, as you see on the slide. It is raw material, work in process, and finished goods. So I don't need to explain that in more detail. Raw material is something that has been purchased, not processed. Finished goods is something that has been completely processed and ready to be shipped out. Work in process is anything in between. And in some places, it is also referred to as work in progress or WIP. And in between, I have put MRO, maintenance, repair, and operating inventory. This is what I call as the Monroe Muffler inventory, where you keep inventory just for the maintenance, repair, and operating. And you also have some other kinds of inventory which I don't specify in the slide, which is supplies. If you're a hospital, you don't have any one of these, you have supplies. If you have an educational institution, again, you have supplies. So for all of these kinds of inventory, some of these models that we are talking about can be used. Again, going back, if it is dependent demand, MRP, Materials Requirement Planning, is a better method. Let us talk about a few reasons to carry inventory. Most of it are obvious. Why managers need to carry inventory? You may ask me, why are we even addressing this question? As I said earlier, inventory can be a liability. So you want to have the least amount of inventory, still meet customer requirements. So what are some of the reasons that you want to carry inventory? Number one reason is demand varies, demand fluctuates. We talked about this in a lot of detail in forecasting. Our forecasts are never 100% accurate. We also discussed that short-term forecasts are more accurate. We also discussed aggregate forecasts are more accurate than disaggregate forecasts. Remember the case of Nike. When Nike tried to forecast everything to the last detail, the 13th size shoe, red color, so on and on, you found out that their forecast was very erroneous. So what are we talking about? Demand varies, demand fluctuates. There is almost zero probability that you can predict the demand exactly. For that reason, managers need to carry some surplus, extra inventory. Second, variations in delivery time. Your suppliers cannot be trusted to supply everything on time all the time, unless, like I said in the example of companies such as McDonald's and Toyota and some of these companies where they have very solid supplier base and they make sure that things are supplied on time all the time. But in many cases, that doesn't happen. So because of the variations in delivery time, you need to keep some surplus inventory. Another reason, many a time you get quantity discounts. When you place an order for a big quantity, you need only 25, but you know that if you order in batches of 40, you will get a discount. So you buy excess, keep it in inventory. Economies of scale. Many a time you're shipping this in pallets or trucks. The truck holds 20 washing machines that you're ordering for your retail outlet. It doesn't make sense to order 18 or 16 because the cost per unit to ship will be higher. So you will order more than what you need and keep that in inventory. Next, for a manufacturing manager or a retail manager, it gives you a lot of flexibility in planning if you have inventory. If you don't have inventory, you have very little flexibility. You recall in lean operations, we have very, very little excess inventory, if any. So the flexibility for the manager there is limited. If the supplier doesn't ship on time, if there is a machine breakdown, you will be stuck with no production. So there is very little flexibility. Inventory gives you that flexibility. Finally, in many instances, there are some raw materials, some commodities that you foresee shortage of, or you foresee that the price will go up in the near future. So what do managers do then? They carry excess inventory to make sure that they get that good deal ahead of the prices going up or ahead of the shortage occurring. So these are some of the reasons that managers carry inventory, whether in manufacturing, retail, or wholesale. But again, I emphasize, inventory can be a liability unless you manage it properly.